Did you know that according to Jesus, it's possible to believe he's going to return, even be waiting for him to come back, and still end up in hell when he arrives? That's a shocking message. Maybe it's one that we'd really prefer not to hear, but it is the message that Jesus is teaching us in this parable. Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30 are a warning. They're meant to shock us, and not just shock us for the sake of it, but shock us into action. According to Jesus, where we'll end up when he returns doesn't just depend on whether or not we're waiting for him to come back. It's what we do while we wait that really matters. Jesus has been speaking to his followers about his return and how they're to live in the meantime. He's told us, as we saw last week, that there's a right way to wait for him to come back and a wrong way. A wise way that leads to endless joy and celebration like the best wedding ever. And a foolish way that leads to bitter sadness and regret forever. Then he tells us these 3 short stories to help us understand what wise and foolish ways look like. What does it look to live wisely as we wait for Jesus to return? What does it look like to wait foolishly? In the first parable, he taught us that the right way was to be prepared like 5 of those 10 bridesmaids we saw last week. The bridesmaids who were ready with the backup oil, it was them who ended up joining in with the wedding ceremony, and the foolish bridesmaids who didn't bother to prepare, those were the ones who missed out. So how are we to wait? We're to be prepared. We're to be ready. But what does preparing for Jesus' return involve? Well, in this next parable, in this the second parable of 3, Jesus puts some flesh on the bones for us. And he tells us more specifically what being ready for his return looks like. And it looks like getting to work. And he tells us a story to prove it to us. It's a story about a businessman and his servants. Verse 14, Jesus says, again, and he's talking about his return, will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. Now, we don't know where the man is going, we don't know why he's going or when he'll come back, and neither do his servants. But time is money, and so he assigns his servants to take care of his business investments while he's away. The servants come into his office and are given a lump sum of cash that they're to put to use in his absence. And the amounts here are absolutely astronomical. When I worked back in my banking days, I remember a colleague telling me about when they'd got to visit the vaults underneath the Bank of England with the gold reserves, where they keep all the bullion and the bars and the precious metals, all locked away under the streets of London. And according to him, the security guards make you stand on super sensitive scales when you walk in and when you walk out to make sure that your weight hasn't changed. You haven't filled your pockets with little scraps of gold or anything like that, because a single gram of gold is so precious that they just don't want anyone to walk out with anything they shouldn't have. That's how precious gold is, and yet the man in this parable is giving it away by the bagful. It tells us how rich this man is, and it tells us how much trust he was putting in his servants. Look at verse 15. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The master leaves them to it. And the question is, what will the servants do with this extraordinary amount of cash they've been entrusted with? Jesus doesn't leave us to wonder, actually. He tells us straight away. We're told that the first 2 servants got to work. They lost no time at all. Before their master had even disappeared over the horizon, they started investing. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gave 5 more. This isn't the sort of incompetence you see on the average episode of The Apprentice. This man really knows his business. He gets out and gets to work, buying low and selling high, speculating to accumulate and all of that, and it pays off handsomely. 5 bags quickly becomes 10 bags. The second servant does the same attitude, the same return, 100%. 2 bags becomes 4 bags. This master was clearly right to trust these servants with the astronomical sums he'd put in their care. His money is in safe hands with them. But then we see the third servant, and wait a minute, why is he covered in mud? What's he doing with that shovel? Verse 18, but the man who had received 1 bag went off and hid his master's money. This is the first century equivalent of stuffing the mattress full of cash. Instead of getting to work, the servant has taken the safe option, just digging a hole in the ground and burying it there. He won't gain anything, but at least he won't lose anything either by taking his gold deep into the forest and burying it in a place and putting a big X over the top so only he knows where it is. He leaves it buried there until his master returns. And in verse 19, he does. Verse 19, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. Notice the master returns after a long time, reinforcing what we saw last week, that as we wait for Jesus to return, we're to expect delays. But the day finally comes. And when the master comes, he calls his servants to show them what they've done with his money. In comes servant number 1, carrying 10 big bags full of glistening gold. Master, I've doubled your money. Just look at the words in verse 21. They're so precious, aren't they? His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Oh, what an end-of-year appraisal that is. Now, on your way out, call in servant number 2. Out goes servant number 1, in comes servant number 2, along with 4 bags of precious, pristine metal. And the servant shows his master the fruits of his labour. And again, the master responds with the same words and the same remarkable invitation as he did to the first servant, come and share in my happiness. Now, it's worth noticing that both servants, despite their different levels of ability, despite the different amount of gold they present to their master in the end, they receive exactly the same reward, exactly the same commendation, exactly the same invitation. See, this master isn't all about the finances. He's pleased with his servant's faithfulness and fruitfulness. It doesn't say, well done, good and successful and profitable servant, but well done, good and faithful servant. Both servants, the one with 10 bags, the one with 4 bags of gold, they've both been faithful to him. They've both been fruitful. They've both put what he's given them to work to the best of their ability. And that's what pleases this master the most. And so they receive the same reward, a promotion to a role with more responsibility and an invitation to celebrate with him. And then the third servant comes in. Again, he's holding his shovel over his shoulder. His wheelbarrow full of gold isn't sparkling. It's covered in dirt and earthworms and all sorts of horrible things like that. But this servant has got his excuses lined up already. He hasn't made any money, but he hasn't lost any either. And really, this is all the master's fault anyway. Verse 24, then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. The servant portrays his master as the hardest of hard-nosed capitalists, constantly asking his workers to produce more with less, ruthlessly driving down production costs and raising prices so that he can reap the rewards himself. A cruel man, a scary man, the sort of person you really, really don't want to work for. Does that seem like an accurate description of the man we've heard about so far? It certainly doesn't seem to be the way he treats his servants, does it? He's generously granted them huge amounts of responsibility, carefully selected the right person for just the right job. None of them are in over their heads or out of their depth. His kind words and generous invitation to the previous servants, it doesn't speak of a person who is a harsh, horrible taskmaster, the sort of boss for whom nothing is ever enough. Now, these servants' words don't seem to reflect reality. They aren't a fair representation of the master. In fact, his feeble excuses, well, they just go to show the true nature of his crimes. Did you hear the story about the driver in Nebraska who called the cops to report a car driving the wrong way down the freeway? Nebraska Police Department dispatched a patrol car to investigate, and sure enough, before long, they found a car driving along on the wrong side of the road. When they found the offending driver, it turns out it was the person who made the call himself. He was so drunk he didn't realise it was him who was driving on the wrong side of the road, and so the police arrested him. His own words convicted him. And that's the same as this guy here. The master responds, showing how terrible an excuse this really is. If you really thought I was so ruthless that the only thing I care about is profit, why didn't you take my money and put it in the bank at least? I would have got some interest out of it. No, the master knows his servant. He knows his lack of activity wasn't motivated by fear, but by laziness. Verse 26, but his master answered him, "You wicked, lazy servant." He had the ability to turn a profit, even a modest one, with the money that he was entrusted with. But he lacked the motivation, the appetite to do so. So he dug his hole with the aim of putting his feet up and forgetting all about it until the master returned. He did the absolute bare minimum. And what a disastrous decision it was. His bag of gold is taken away from him and given to the one who's demonstrated his faithfulness by getting to work. The servant is left with nothing. Less than nothing, actually. Whereas the two faithful servants are invited in to share in their master's happiness, this lazy servant is cast out to experience nothing but deep regret and sorrow forever. And like last week, the story ends on a desperately sad and scary note. And like last week, it has so much to tell us about Jesus' return and how we're to wait for it. Two lessons this parable tells us. The first is that faithful followers work diligently and receive joy. Faithful followers work diligently and receive joy. Like the businessman in the story, Jesus has given all his followers responsibility while he's away. At the age of the church, the time between his ascension and his return in glory, that time in the middle, it's the age of opportunity. And like the servants in the story, he's trusted us with his kingdom work while he's away. Now, he doesn't give us all the same kingdom work to do. Just as the master knew his servants and gave them different sums of money to steward, so the Lord who knows us gives his kingdom work to us in different ways and different measures. It raises the question, what do the bags of gold represent in the story? I'm sure most of you will know this parable, not as the parable of the bags of gold, but the parable of the talents. The talent was the weight measurement in the ancient world, and so instead of bags of gold, we may be more used to reading this as 5 talents of gold, and that word talent is taken from this context and used to kind of mean something that we're just naturally good at. So we might read this as saying that Jesus has given us all things that we're good at in different measures, and the challenge is, will we take those things and put them to use for him? But I think that might be not saying enough about this parable, because you see, the master gives them the money, he gives the talents to his servants on the basis of their abilities. So they can't be exactly the same thing. The gold has to stand for something else. Here's my answer. I think the bags of gold, the talents, if you like, stand for everything the Lord gives us. Not just our abilities, what we're naturally good at, what we like doing, but absolutely everything the Lord gives us. As well as having different abilities, we all have different opportunities, different life situations, different neighbours. We all have different amounts of time and money. We all have different personalities, capabilities and capacities, different gifts and abilities, yes, and we can use all of them for Christ's kingdom work. And we have different interests or hobbies which we can use to help advance his kingdom. And the Lord has generously given us everything we have. Our lives may look very different to one another's, but each of us has the opportunity to use what God has given us to the best of our ability to advance his kingdom work. So, faithful follower of Jesus, whatever he's given you, are you using it in his service? Do you see the money, the time, the property, the relationships you have as yours to do what you want with? Or do you see them as his, to use for his work? Using what the Lord has given us like that will have a cost to us in this life. Our lives will be harder because of it. We'll be more tired, more stressed, less rich, less popular too. Remember, the easy option was to take the gold and bury it in the ground. That was what the lazy servant did, which means using what God's given us for his kingdom will be hard work. And maybe that sort of thing makes us bristle a little bit. Maybe we wonder why we can't just have an easy life. Perhaps we can sympathise with that third servant, and maybe we're starting to share his view of the master. If we read passages like this and find a bit of ourselves beginning to resent Jesus, we have to remind ourselves that he's already given us far more than we can ever give to him. He's not a ruthless taskmaster who wants to use and abuse his people. He's the loving Saviour who gave his life for us on the cross. And Jesus shows us here that serving him, no matter the cost, will always be worth it in the end. Hear those kind words the master says to his faithful servants when they're called to settle their accounts. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share your master's happiness. Now imagine the Lord Jesus saying that to you when you're called to give an account to him on the day of judgment. What wouldn't be worth giving up and putting on the line to hear those words from him on that day? A restful evening? A friendship? A more extravagant holiday? Nothing can compare to receiving that sort of welcome from our Lord when he returns. So faithful servants get to work diligently and receive the Lord's joy. Faithful servants work diligently and receive joy. Now, it might be that as gospel people we start to squirm here. Hold on a minute, we say. Aren't we saved through grace alone? This all sounds dangerously close to saying we earn our way to heaven by working for Jesus rather than through Jesus' free forgiveness of our sin. Well, if you're starting to worry about that a little bit, I can see where you're coming from. But the Bible never says that our salvation has nothing to do with our works. In fact, there's an unbreakable link between works and salvation. The error we make is thinking that good works come first before God's grace to us, rather than afterwards. As it's been said, we're saved through faith alone, but the faith that saves is never alone. And working for Jesus' kingdom is the default setting of the saved Christian. If we're not willing to use what he's given us to work for him, it might be a good sign that we don't actually belong to him in the first place, that we're fake followers. Because while faithful followers work diligently and receive joy, fake followers wait lazily and receive judgment. Jesus' words at the end of this parable are shocking and scary. They tell us that for some, Jesus' return will result in an eternity outside of his goodness and love, a place of dark judgment, of tears and regret. It sounds like a terrible place to end up, and it is. And passages like this should make us sit bolt upright and consider whether we're going to be those who are left out. That's the effect that Jesus wants his words to have on us. Not because he likes scaring us or leading us to worry, but because he wants us to listen up and listen to him. If you're here tonight and you're worried about ending up in the same place as that lazy servant, hear the words of Jesus here as a test. Are you using what he's given you to work for his kingdom? Or are you happy to live your life without any consideration for his cause? Are you aiming to have the best of both worlds, to enjoy a comfortable life now and then expect a place in heaven when he comes back? Do you see the church as a place to put your feet up and be served, or a place to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in? Jesus wants us to serve him faithfully. And if we're not willing to, it's a good sign that we don't belong to him in the first place. We're saved through faith alone, but the faith that saves is never alone. So where would you put yourself tonight? Faithful follower, willing to use all that the Lord has given you to serve him, heading for a joyful reward in Jesus' kingdom upon his return? Or does your lack of willingness to work for the Lord reveal you to be a fake follower, more interested in your own comfort than his kingdom, and therefore heading for an eternity on the outside? Wherever you put yourself, the good news is there's still time. As of now, the master hasn't yet returned, and he's giving you this time so that you can put things right with him. Maybe you need to start by putting your faith in him for the first time tonight. Maybe you need to respond by getting to work for him, making his service the priority for every day of your life. You could start with something small, like volunteering to be on the setup team on a Sunday morning. You could do something big, like move to a different country to share the gospel with a people group who's never heard it before. And there are a million ways in between those two poles. How we serve him will look different for each one of us. But if we're faithful servants, however we end up doing it, we will serve him. Maybe you're sitting here tonight, and I expect this is the case for most of us. Faithful, but weary. Kingdom work is hard work, isn't it? Using all that God has given us to serve him can be exhausting. It can be discouraging when fruit is scarce, when the return on our investment often seems pitifully low. And if that's you this evening, then lift your eyes and look forward to the day when the Master settles accounts with you. The day when you'll stand before him and tell him of every evening given up for his work, every pound out of your pocket donated, every meal cooked to help someone, every lift given to the hospital, every opportunity to speak of him that you've taken, every brother or sister encouraged, every handshake or hug offered in welcome. And look forward to the moment your eyes meet his, and he utters those long-awaited words. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share in your master's happiness.